Part 75. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 741. Chapter 741. Why can't Fan Kinjao bear any grievance? September has passed and the weather has become colder. Bailey Fengming's prediction was correct. The emperor ordered a strict ban on Fengcheng and Nanjing. Not only did the daily curfew time be advanced by 2 hours, the people in the city were not allowed to leave the city at will, and people outside the city were not allowed to enter the city for the time being. This move seemed to mean that the emperor was no longer suspicious of Bailey Fengming, but Fan Kinjao knew very well that the emperor had always been very suspicious. Just like the current Hua family, they are still living on the edge of a knife. The only thing worthy of fortunately, the uncles are still in good health in Huaishang. In November, Ziliang ushered in the first heavy snowfall of the year. The city was covered with white snow, and the rapidly cooling air was so cold that it was difficult to adapt. Nanjing and Fengcheng are still under lockdown. Although the murderer has not yet been caught, under such strict supervision, at least there have been no missing persons in the two cities. I heard that the two Zhongpings burst into tears when they learned that the people of the two cities were finally safe and sound. The two men, who were nearly 100 years old together, cried out in the court hall, "Long live the emperor!" They both fainted and died in the court hall due to lack of oxygen. The scene was so spectacular and sad that Hua Yaoding didn't even have the appetite for dinner after returning home that day. Although the emperor has ordered the city to be sealed off, the people assigned to investigate the two cities have not yet made a decision. The second prince, who has been shrinking his head and tail, is a little eager to try. However, the court has not been vocal about the second prince. Even if the second prince is interested, he has no choice. Not recommended by ministers. Bailey Rongs was rare in keeping a low profile. I heard that Aunt Fan of the third prince's mansion was very favored during this period. A few days ago, some people saw the third prince personally accompanying him when shopping. However, concubine Yu called her into the palace that day. When Bailey Rongs came out of the palace again, his face was extremely dark, probably because he was scolded by concubine Yu. Fan Kinjao didn't feel any surprise when he heard about this. Fan Swinning's skill with men has always been superb, so it is normal for Pan Yulu to be unable to compete with her. However, this matter did not affect Fan Swinning. Soon after, rumors spread in the main city that they were both sisters from the Fan family. Although Fan Kinjao was the crown prince, she had never been married. How could she be as lucky as Fan Swinning? Even as a concubine, she was held in the hands of the third prince and pampered all day long. "Miss, how could those people say such outrageous things?" Ning'an was furious. Such rumors were spreading in the main city now, which was simply unbearable. Mother Su also frowned. "Do you need me to go to the third prince's residence in person? Even if her little lady has not yet entered the royal family, she will never allow others to slander her like this. If we really go, we will fall into her trap." Fan Kinjao smiled coldly. She was indeed the princess, but she had not yet passed the marriage. If the rumors really caused trouble in the third prince's residence, once the news spreads, she will be a petty person who will use her power to bully others. Although Fan Swinning keeps making small moves, she never makes too big moves. This is also the reason why she is smart and can live safely until now. Are we just going to let this rumor continue to spread? The way to suppress rumors is to find another rumor to suppress the original one. Anyway, Bailey Fengming is still acting as an idle prince, and Fan Kinjao has been idle recently, so he called Mu Yan over that afternoon. As the weather gets colder, the people in the main city are miserable. Fan Kinjao took Mu Yan to study for several days and formulated a new kind of medicated charcoal. After adding it to Tangpozi, it has the effect of calming the mind and making the heat last for a long time. This fragrant charcoal has been sold in Qingnanzai. It was all snapped up by those high-ranking mansions in the main city. As a result, Qingnanzai became famous again, and Fan Qinjiao and Mu Yan also made a lot of money. As for the rumors that Fan Suining spent so much time spreading, they have long been buried under the reputation of Qingnanzai. Fan Qinjiao thought that around the new year, the concubines in the harem would be diligent in moving around, so he specially loaded a cart of charcoal and sent it to the queen. Even if the queen couldn't use it herself, it would be good to give it to others. When the carriage loaded with charcoal drove into the palace, it really made everyone envious. They are all people with daughters-in-law, but look at their queens and wives, and then look at theirs. Can't be compared. Compared with each other, it was they themselves who got angry. Although Queen Zhen 11 knew that Fan Qinjiao had always been careful and sensible, she still smiled from ear to ear in the envious eyes of everyone. That night, she asked Lily to carry a basket of medicated charcoal and send it to Yuya Palace. Don't think that she doesn't know what's going on outside while she's in the palace. Since your daughter-in-law dares to blatantly slander my daughter-in-law, it's not too much for me to cause trouble for you now. As the saying goes, courtesy should reciprocate. Concubine Yu. I was so angry that I couldn't eat for 3 days. Of course Concubine Yu knew that the queen was giving her eye drops on purpose, but she couldn't hold back and called Bailey Rongs into the palace again. She cursed her and ordered Bailey Rongs not to enter the palace again for 3 months. Fan Swining's yard. Although Bailey Rongs wanted to argue for Fan Swining, under the rage of his mother and concubine, he silently swallowed all the words that came to his lips. After returning home that day, he went to Pan Yula's yard. Fan Swining. I didn't expect things to turn out like this at all. Fan Swining really couldn't figure out why the empress cherished Fan Qinjiao so much. No daughter-in-law in the royal family was not wronged. Moreover, she only extended her hand gently, so how could she not tolerate Fan Qinjiao's body? Feeling aggrieved? The most important thing is that the rumors about the main city have long been dispelled. At this time, Fan Qinjiao had never gotten any advantage from him, but he was stabbed by the queen. Fan Qinjiao also didn't expect that the queen would take the initiative to trouble concubine Yu because of her affairs, but now she had no time to think about Fan Swining vomiting blood. Her sister-in-law's belly was getting bigger day by day, and her grandmother checked her pulse in person. Several times when Fan Qinjiao visited his grandmother, he heard her sighing quietly. Fan Qinjiao knew that the peace of the Hua family would be broken when his sister-in-law gave birth. And she must make adequate preparations in advance. On the first night of the 12th lunar month, Chaiwu came to the yard quietly. Ta Shui, who hadn't seen Chaiwu for a long time, was excited with the child who got candy, pestering Chaiwu and yelling woo-woo. Fortunately, Chaiwu was always calm and on business, so he sent the letter to Fan Qinjiao's hand. Only then did he turn around and stick to Ta Shui again. Ning'an also missed Chaiwu a little. Seeing that Chaiwu had lost weight, she directly took 2 little things, one black and one white, who were half a person tall, and got into the small kitchen in the yard. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 742. Chapter 742 Are the Hua family all beasts? Fan Qinjiao opened the letter by candlelight, but he didn't expect that it was written by the 8th prince to Bailey Fengming. 3 pages full, basically filled with complaints. Just by looking at this weight, Fan Qinjiao knew that the 8th prince was severely abused by his uncles. The men of the Hua family have been practicing martial arts since they were young, and have long been accustomed to a life of climbing and fighting. Now they are secretly stationing troops in Huaishang, and they practice from 9 to 5 every day. How could the 8th prince, who has been pampered since childhood, ever experience this? Everyone was so shocked. Concubine Zhongshu's status is not comparable to other concubines in the palace, but she loves the 8th prince a little bit. In other words, concubine Zhongshu is worried that the 8th prince will be wronged because of herself, so she has always held the 8th prince in her hands. This also led to the situation where the 8th prince was unable to achieve success in military affairs. Now that the 8th prince was left in the south, he would inevitably have to deal with the boys from the Flower family all day long. The boys from the Flower family couldn't bear to see that the dignified man was powerless, so they simply escorted the 8th prince to the training ground, practicing with the new recruits every day. The miserable 8th prince was trained every day to the point where he couldn't eat anything and fell asleep. He was completely abused and turned into a pig-like life. The 8th prince is really going crazy. He just can't figure out what the Hua family grew up on. How could they raise such a group of beasts? Now looking at the 8th prince's complaints throughout the article, Fan Kinjao could only sigh, "8th prince, you have worked hard." His uncle himself knows that when he was still in the military camp in the main city, which of the soldiers who entered the military camp was not tortured by his uncles and complained endlessly? To be honest, the 8th prince has survived to this day. However, the 8th prince's complaint was just a complaint, but there was still admiration and adoration for the flower boy hidden between the lines. It seemed that they really got along well with each other, so Fan Kinjao felt relieved. "Miss, Suhong is here." "It's at the back door." Ningtian lifted the curtain and entered. Suhong's identity is quite embarrassing after all. Of course she doesn't dare to come directly to the door during the day, so she can only quietly knock on the back door of the western suburbs mansion at night. Fan Kinjao knew that Suhong had always been measured and would never come without any reason. He threw the letter into the candlestick and waited until the letter was completely burned to ashes before he nodded and said, "Bring her in." Ningtian accepted the order, turned around and walked out. Soon, Suhong, who was wearing a cloak, entered the door. Since Fan Kinjao left Fan Mansion last time, this was the first time he saw Suhong. In the past half a year, the number of people has decreased a lot. The originally charming eyes and the romantic aura on her body have long been smoothed away by the baptism of time. Now she looks like a delicate-looking woman. Suhong has met the crown princess. Suhong had also heard the rumors that Fan Swinning had spread, and now she was relieved to see that the crown princess looked good. Fan Kinjao motioned Suhong to sit down and talk. "There are no outsiders, there are no need for so many complicated rules, just sit down." Suhong sat obediently on the round stool opposite. "Actually, there is nothing important to do today. It's just that I saw how busy my father-in-law has been recently, so I wanted to come and tell the princess." Fan Kinjao raised his eyebrows. "Do you know what you are busy with?" "A few days ago, I followed my father-in-law carefully and saw him finally entering the third prince's mansion. However, I don't know what he was doing for the third prince. But I found out from the servants in the mansion. My father-in-law has been running out of the city a while ago." This sounds interesting. If Fan Kinjao remembers correctly, her good grandfather followed Bailey Rongs to the end in the last life, so it is not surprising that Bailey Rongs chooses to reuse him now. Birds of a feather flock together, and Bailey Rongs and Fan Zixio have always been in tune. "Do you know what he was doing when he left the city?" Fan Kinjao came back to his senses and asked again. "I'm too stupid." Suhong blamed herself. "You have done a good job," Fan Kinjao said with a smile. Suhong was a backyard woman after all, and she was able to find out so much because she was careful. It happened that Chaiwu and Taxiu also had enough to eat and drink under Ninggan's feeding. Chaiwu had always been a business person. After filling his stomach, he wandered in and waited for Fan Kinjao to give Bailey a meal. Feng Ming's reply. Seeing something dark and big come in, Suhong was frightened. Fan Kinjao smiled and said, "It's okay, it's just a big cat all the time and doesn't hurt anyone." Plain red. Are all cats this big now? Fan Kinjao thought about what Suhong just said, and wrote a reply to Bailey Fengming. Fan Zixia went out of the city privately, and more than once. He must not be underestimated. This matter still needs to be investigated carefully by Bailey Fengming. Hunted until Fan Kinjao finished writing his reply, Chai was swung his tail and left. Suhong was relieved. Fan Kinjao thought that her father was also there when Ziyiling died that day. Although things had calmed down, she still asked, "Is there anything going on with the other people in the Fan family?" Suhong naturally knows who this other person is. The young master rarely returns to the house during this period. I was also worried that he would let out a sigh of relief and tell the story of that day, so I sent people around me to follow him for a few days. Later, I found him in Yuhangyuan. I heard that I am very close to a geisha and have been living there for half a month. Suhong's meaning was obvious, indicating that Fan Kinjao didn't need to worry. Fan Kinjao twitched the corner of his mouth. Fortunately, his mother was determined to leave back then, otherwise the short-term nightmare would have turned into an eternal nightmare. Some people are destined to be like that in their lives, but you have to be more open-minded. After all, you still have a son. What will happen to your son if you fall? Suhong did not expect that the crown princess would take the initiative to comfort her, and hurriedly said, "Princess Lao is worried. In fact, I have long been used to it. I have no worries about food and clothing and have a son by my side. Even if the young master brings back a few more people, the government can't just kick me out." Fan Kinjao nodded. They are all women who are suffering. It is best if they can think openly. Suhong saw that it was getting late, so she stood up and left. Fan Kinjao knew that Suhong had a son and his position in the Fan family would not be shaken. However, he had no income and was probably short of money, so he asked Ninghan to take 100 taels of silver notes and give it to Su. Read. Suhong sat in the carriage, looking at the banknotes in her hand, feeling uneasy. It is said that women are most like mothers. As smart and steady as the crown princess, and responsible for the overall situation, I am afraid that the former eldest grandma of the Fan family will not be bad at it. Suhong was born in a place like a brothel, so she naturally understands men's preference for the new and hates the old. She can also understand it. After all, no one wants to look at the same face for the rest of their lives. But now, she really looks down on Fan Yurong from the bottom of her heart. If he had only cherished it a little, he might not have ended up in this situation today. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 743. Chapter 743. This child cannot be kept. As we enter the 12th lunar month, every household has begun to prepare New Year's goods in advance. The Hua family also had to prepare early, and at this busiest time, Wu Kaiozwo's stomach reacted. When Fan Kinjao arrived at the yard, he saw his brother and grandfather standing in the yard. In Ziliang, men are never allowed to go in when a woman gives birth to a child. Fan Kinjao was thinking about his sister-in-law, and it was inconvenient to say anything to his brother and grandfather. He nodded and hurried in with the medicine box. In the room at this time, Wu Kaiozao was walking back and forth with the support of Aunt He. Tao Yuxian ordered someone to prepare hot water and change the sheets and bedding. Seeing Fan Kinjao come in, he quickly called someone over. "Your sister-in-law's birth was a little crooked. I had corrected it for him in advance, but just now the effect of touching it is not very good. I will need your help for a while." "Grandma, don't worry, my sister-in-law will leave it to me." Fan Kinjao had never given birth, but he had studied medicine for 2 generations, so he was already familiar with the things in these books. Wu Kaiozhao's fetal movement was not very severe, and the pain would only occur every hour or two. Tao Yuxian was worried about the food cooked in the house, so he went out to supervise it in person. Not long after, and he walked in with a tray, which was filled with Wu Kaiozhao's favorite food. When Wu Kaiozhao finished eating, he continued to walk on the ground. The pain lasted until night, and Wu Qiuzeo was in so much pain that he could no longer stand up. Fan Qinjiao knew it was almost done, so he helped Wu Qiuzeo to the bed. He rolled up his sleeves and applied the medicated oil that he had prepared on his bulging belly. He used silver needles to fix the position of the fetus. Come out, then look for the fetus's head and push it down gently. Tao Yuxian didn't dare to delay, and kept checking the situation below Wu Qiuzeo. Just after midnight, a loud cry finally echoed through the western suburbs mansion. Hua Fenning, who had been out in the cold until his body felt numb, was stunned. And he poked her head out from inside, looked at Hua Fenning and said with a smile, "Congratulations, young master, you are a brother." Hua Fenning gradually came back to his senses after hearing these words, but there was no smile on his face like a new father. Hua Yaoding could tell what his grandson was thinking at a glance, patted his shoulder and said, "It is a great joy that mother and child are safe. You don't need to think too much about other things." Before he finished speaking, Hua Fenning suddenly took long strides and rushed into the house. The heat and blood in the delivery room were dissipated by the cold air on Hua Fenning's body. Fan Qinjiao and Tao Yuxian were stunned when they looked at Hua Fenning, who suddenly entered the door. At this moment, Hua Fenning snatched the sun from Wu Qiuzuo's face, looked at the swaddled little thing, gritted his teeth and raised his hands, as if he was going to throw it to the ground. Wu Qiuzeo, who originally had a smile on his face, was confused. "Ms. Sir, what are you going to do?" Hua Fenning looked at his wife with eyes full of dead. "Qiuzeo, just think that I, Hua Fenning, owe you something. It doesn't matter whether you hate me or blame me, I absolutely cannot have this child." Wu Qiuzeo looked at Hua Fenning in shock, completely unable to believe what he heard. If someone else's family had a baby, she wouldn't know how happy she would be, but why was her biological father throwing her child to death as soon as it was born? By Wu Qiuzeo, who was weak from birth, and after such a shock, Wu Qiuzeo fainted to death. Old madam, grandma is bleeding a lot," the maid on the side was frightened. Tao Yuxian, who originally wanted to stop Hua Fenning, had no choice but to turn around and check on Wu Qiuzuo. "Hua Fenning. Are you crazy?" Hua Yaoding, who heard the noise outside, strode into the delivery room. Looking at his great-grandson being held high in the air, he became furious and slapped Hua Fenning in the face. Snap dash. The originally noisy delivery room suddenly became quiet. The maids in the room retreated one after another, not even daring to raise their heads. Half of Hua Fenning's face was instantly swollen, but despite this, the high-raised arm still did not fall. This is his own flesh and blood, how can he not feel bad? No matter how painful it is, this child must not be kept, otherwise the Hua family will definitely cause disaster. Seeing this, Hua Yaoding snatched the child over, looked at Hua Fenning and said, "Follow me to the study." Hua Fenning looked at his grandfather's back, gritted his teeth and followed him silently. Fan Qinjiao looked at his grandmother and said, "Sister-in-law, just leave it to me." Tao Yuxian nodded. He didn't even have time to clean his hands, so he walked out with his hands covered in blood. Fan Qinjiao carefully stopped Wu Qiuzuo's bleeding, and then asked the maid outside to stew ginseng soup. The blood in the room has not dissipated yet, and it is filled with breath. In Ziliang, even in the palace, no doctor dared to distinguish between men and women. Once found out, it would be a capital crime of beheading. The Tao family's medical skills cover a wide range of areas, but they do not teach people how to identify the gender of a child. Grandma doesn't know how to do it, but Fan Qinjiao understands. In his last life, Fan Qinjiao wanted a child of his own, and he even hoped to have a man to carry on the family line for Bailey wrongs, so he learned the Tao family's forbidden technique. So if Fan Qinjiao had thought about it, he would have known the gender of the child long ago. She didn't do this because she just wanted everything to obey God's will, but she had actually already thought of the so-called retreat. Nearly a quarter of an hour later, Wu Qiuzhao faintly opened his eyes. The moment she regained consciousness, she struggled to get up. "Child, my child." Fan Qinjiao held the person down and said softly, "Sister-in-law, don't worry, the child was taken away by the grandfather, my brother was called to the study, and my grandmother is also there." Wu Qiuzhao was actually still worried, but the bleeding from her lower body had just stopped. If she couldn't even get off the ground, how could she go out? Fell heavily back on the bed, Wu Qiuzhao could only cry silently. Ever since she married into the Hua family, everyone in the family treated her very well, and her husband-in-law was very loving to her. Even when she was 10 months pregnant, he was always by her side. The thought of taking a concubine. However, Wu Qiuzhao remembered that as her belly grew bigger, she woke up several times late at night and saw her husband sitting aside in a daze. At that time, she only thought that he was happy, but now it seems that he is not at all. She thought wrong. Sister-in-law deserves to feel aggrieved. If it were me, I would try my best to keep my child. Fan Qinjiao took out a handkerchief and gently wiped the tears on Wu Qiuzhou's face. "Qinjiao, did I do something wrong?" Wu Qiuzhou looked at Fan Qinjiao helplessly. Fan Qinjiao shook his head, "My sister-in-law didn't do anything wrong, and my brother didn't do anything wrong either. The person who was wrong was the one who was always aloof but never admitted that he was wrong." Wu Qiuzhao's heart tightened. Could this mean today? I think my sister-in-law also knows what the Hua family has gone through in the past, so she should understand how deeply the emperor is suspicious of the Hua family. The reason why the Hua family can live a stable life now is because although my brother is the descendant of the Hua family, he has nothing to do with the government. Isn't this good? Of course Wu Qiuzhao had heard about the Hua family, but she thought it had been settled long ago, and she married Hua Fengning because of him and never wanted him. A meteoric rise. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 744. Chapter 744. The Hua family will definitely suffer another heavy blow. Fan Qinjiao curled his lips, but found that he couldn't laugh. It seems good to live a stable life under the eyes of the emperor, but now the Hua family is fighting in the battlefield for following the Hua family, and even dying in it's unfair to the soldiers on the battlefield. The soldiers who once went to the battlefield did so to protect their homes and the country, but the belief in their letters was that they had been the generals for hundreds of years, and they were called the Huajia gatekeepers of Ziliang. Waging a war requires faith, and the Hua family is their faith. Later, the Hua family suffered heavy losses from the imperial court, and few of those who followed the Hua family died. But people are all continuous, and those who follow the Hua family will naturally have descendants. Now that the Hua family also has descendants, how can we imagine the consequences? Those people may not follow the Hua family again. Of course Wu Qiuzhao knew about the glorious period of the Hua family, but she did not believe that under the suppression of imperial power, anyone really dared to follow the Hua family on their own. Those people may not have such thoughts, but they are afraid that someone will incite them to have such thoughts, or that someone will make the emperor mistakenly think that the Hua family has such thoughts. Wu Qiuzhao's heart sank, and he even breathed heavily. She doesn't understand the things in the court, but she also understands that under the imperial power, if anyone really dares to pursue it privately, it is disrespectful to the imperial power, and the 9 tribes will be punished. Fan Qinjiao's dark eyes were also extremely gloomy. Now that Bailey Rongs is clinging to Bailey Fengming, he will naturally not let go of such a good opportunity. He is afraid that within 3 days, rumors will spread throughout the city. The emperor has always been suspicious of the Hua family, and the Hua family will definitely be hit hard again. I thought too simply. If this is really the case, just listen to Fengning. I will pretend that this child was never born. When I go down there in the future, I will personally apologize to him, Wu Qiu said tightly. He clutched the quilt under him tightly and said these words almost through gritted teeth. That was the meat that fell from her body, how could she part with it? But if the lives of hundreds of members of the Hua family and even her natal family were really implicated because of this child, how could she afford it? And when that time comes, will her child be able to survive? I will be buried with everyone. The hand that was shaking to the point of coldness was clenched by a small hand. Wu Qiuzhao opened his eyes and saw Fan Qingjiao's beautiful and always reassuring face. That's my little nephew. Even if my sister-in-law is willing to part with it, I won't be able to part with it? Yes, but... Sister-in-law, don't worry. Since this child is born, I will definitely find a way to let him grow up healthily. However, I hope that my sister-in-law will not tell anyone these words for the time being. When everything is settled, I will have a good talk with my brother. Not too late. How old is Fan Qingjiao this year? At the age of teenagers, other boudoir ladies are probably still fluttering at butterflies. Wu Qiuzhao didn't know what was wrong with her, so she just nodded in agreement. Obviously she knew that Fan Qingjiao was still a child, but when these words came out of Fan Qingjiao's mouth, they were inexplicably convincing. Fan Qingjiao left his brother's yard and went to his grandfather's study. Late in the middle of the night, my grandfather's study was brightly lit. Fan Qingjiao stood outside, and through the blurred window lattice, he could vaguely see his grandfather's rage, his brother's argument, and his grandmother's helplessness. She didn't go in, she just stood outside and watched quietly. In the study room, the quarrels continued. Ah woo woo. The child's bright cry interrupted the irritating quarrel. The child is small, but he is the most spiritual. Perhaps he also feels that the world is not so kind to him, and he cries with such grievance in his infancy. Hua Yaoding sat on the Taishi chair exhausted both physically and mentally. He looked at the little baby in the swaddling clothes and sighed, "You don't need to take care of this matter. Just leave it to me." But looking at the vicissitudes of his grandfather's face, he finally fell silent. Outside the study room, Fan Qingjiao turned and left accompanied by the baby's cry. Taxiu in the yard seemed to be aware of the uneasiness in the house. When he saw Fan Qingjiao walking in, he immediately moved closer and kept rubbing Fan Qingjiao's calf with his big furry head. Fan Qingjiao did not stop, but returned directly to the house. "Light the candlestick and write a letter. Now that the child has been born, we can't wait any longer. Only by taking the initiative can we not really be restrained. However, the emperor is in the deep palace. If you want to see the emperor, you always need a reasonable reason, but this cannot be true. Drag others into the water again." Fan Qingjiao thought about it and could only ask Bailey Fengming to inform the empress first, and then go to the palace to ask for an audience through the empress. After writing the letter, Fan Qingjiao touched Taxiu's head and said, "Go and deliver the letter. Everything will be fine in the house." Taxiu rubbed Fan Qingjiao's palm again, then turned around and walked out. Unexpectedly, when Taxiu came back, he would bring back a reply from Bailey Fengming. Tomorrow morning, the emperor will leave the court to have lunch at Fenji Palace, so Fan Qingjiao has to wait until he goes down even if he wants to enter the palace. Fan Qingjiao looked at the reply letter in his hand silently, then threw it into the candlestick for a while. Tomorrow afternoon. It should be in time. There was movement from the front yard. It was Hua Fengning who returned to the yard. Wu Qiuzhao, who was not sleepy at all, watched her husband enter the door. He had obviously told himself not to feel wronged, but his tears still flowed down uncontrollably. Hua Feng stood there silently for a long time, then suddenly walked over and hugged his wife in his arms. At this moment, both Wu Qiuzhao and Hua Fengning were too tired to say a word. The lights in the courtyard were not extinguished until almost dawn. Tao Yuxian, who had been standing by the window of the study, saw that the lights in his grandson's yard were out, and then turned back to look at her husband on the chair. Have you really thought about it? Hua Yaoding nodded. I used to be reluctant because I was unwilling. I always thought that when the new emperor ascended the throne, the Hua family would be able to serve the country again. The current court has long been full of chaos, so it would be better to retreat earlier. Are you willing to accept it now? Tao Yuxian knew her husband too well. He had served the country and the people all his life. Even if he faced the emperor's suspicion, he still had to stand in the court, just to protect the mountains and rivers of Ziliang. I have to give in if I don't want to. I have a great-grandson, and it's time to go to the countryside and enjoy happiness. Hua Yaoding twitched the corners of his lips, saying he was smiling, but it was uglier than crying. As long as he leaves the main city to retire and return to his hometown, just like the last time, the Hua family will be completely wiped out in the court. In this way, even if the Hua family has an heir, the emperor will definitely be able to tolerate it. Tao Yuxian could see the reluctance in her husband's eyes. When she was in the country, she could still recall the way her husband looked sad all day long and didn't think about food or food. Otherwise, there is nothing wrong with it. Go to sleep. When I come down from court today, I will take the initiative to resign from the emperor. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 745. Chapter 745, Don't be angry with the dog slave. An hour later, Hua Yaoding changed into court clothes and got into the carriage. It was too late for the Hua family to make a fuss yesterday, and the servants in the mansion had just fallen asleep. Fan Zhao was too lazy to find the coachman again, so he simply drove Hua Yaoding to the palace in his own carriage. Now everyone in the court is recommending who is more suitable to go to Fengcheng or Nanjing to investigate. The ministers have different opinions and the emperor remains silent. Hua Yaoding originally thought about recommending himself, but now he lowers his head. He stood aside and allowed the ministers to quarrel. In the court hall, spitting stars were flying all over the sky. The emperor retired from the court with a dark face. Hua Yaoding stayed in front of the emperor after going to court, waiting for advice, but was told that the emperor had already gone to Fenji Palace. Hua Yaoding Jojo frowned. In this case, I will wait until the afternoon to give advice. Bai Tu's head hurt when he saw someone so stubborn, but thinking that he was the future father-in-law of His Royal Highness, he could only persuade him again. General Hua, the emperor has been overworked on the affairs of the two cities these days. Originally, the mood is just not going well, so why should you be upset at this time? If you want to enter the palace to meet the Holy Spirit, you must ask the emperor for help. In this case, the emperor's mood is of course very important. Bai Tu was really thinking about Hua Yaoding, so he persuaded her too much. Hua Yaoding had been up and down in the court for decades, and he could still tell the difference between good intentions and hypocrisy in his eyes. Seeing that Bai Tu was sincerely persuading, he said again, if that's the case, then I will leave the palace first. Thank you, Mr. Bai. Bai Tu breathed a sigh of relief. To be honest, General Hua's murderous aura of fighting on the battlefield was enough to make his calves twist when he saw it. He thought that he had to go to Fenji Palace to serve the emperor, so he found a new leader. Go to Sundefu in front of the emperor to send flowers to Yaoding. Hua Yaoding followed Sundefu all the way towards the palace gate, unable to let go of what was on his mind. When he stood at the gate of the palace, he looked at Sundefu and said, "Today I want to express my opinion to the emperor. I also hope that eunuch Sun can tell Mr. Bai, and he must let Mr. Bai pass the words to the emperor." Yes. Sundefu smiled when he looked at Hua Yaoding. It's just different from the past. It's different now that the Hua family has been established. General Hua is now someone who can give orders to the emperor at will in the palace. Hua Yaoding has outstanding military exploits. Apart from the emperor, whose face has he seen in this palace? But things are different now. Hua Yaoding has something to ask for. No matter how proud he is, he must let it go at this time. Eunuch Sun's words are serious. My grandson did have a baby yesterday. Let's not even mention whether the baby can be raised. I have been an official for decades and I still know the rules. The reason why I want to remonstrate today is that I want to resign and return to my hometown. I also hope that Eunuch Sun will help. Just spread the word. All the eunuchs working in the palace knew about the Hua family's marriage, which shows how quickly the news spread. Hua Yaoding even had to suspect that the emperor was simply delaying to see him, in order to secretly observe what the Hua family was thinking. The more this happens, the more Hua Yaoding wants to express his intention. But Sun Defu said with a half-smile, General Hua is indeed an old man who has been prosperous in the court for decades. His words and actions are impeccable. But think about it, it is the old General Hua who knows how to pretend, and today it's really admirable to be able to import more children into the Hua family. This is clearly another scolding Hua Yaoding for deliberately pretending to be a grandson in the court, so as to get a real great-grandson. This Sun Defu used to be a member of the imperial family, but he could not get close to the emperor. Hua Yaoding had never had any history with the people in the imperial family, but he could really feel Sun Defu's malice. Now being pointed at and scolded by a slave, Hua Yaoding's fists under his sleeves were clenched. But without seeing the emperor, Hua Yaoding couldn't really stir up trouble now, otherwise he might just make a fuss about it again for people with ulterior motives. In that case, I won't bother Eunuch Sunday. Hua Yaoding puffed up his chest. Since this man had no intention of helping him, there was no need for him to continue to waste his time. The murderous aura in Hua Yaoding's body was gained from years of fighting. Now, once he straightened his chest, the invisible sense of oppression instantly enveloped Sun Defu's head. Sun Defu broke into a cold sweat. Hua Yaoding glanced at Sun Defu again before leaving the palace gate. Fan Zhao, who was waiting outside the outer palace gate, had already seen the scene in front of the palace gate. Seeing the master go out, he hurriedly came over and said, "Master, there is no need to be angry with the dog slave. Sooner or later, someone will deal with the dog's contempt for others." Fan Zhao was originally a person who lived by stepping on the edge of a knife and licking blood. Now, even if he follows the Hua family and becomes a good man, his natural energy is still there. Now, although he said this to Hua Yaoding, it is completely gone. The lowered volume also allowed the guards in front of the palace gate and Sun Defu to hear clearly. Sun Defu's face turned black with anger. Okay, what a flower girl, wait for him. At this time, Fan Qinjiao had already packed up in his mansion in the western suburbs. He was waiting to enter the palace after lunch, and then thought of a way to go to the imperial court to give advice. As a result, he heard a commotion in the direction of the entrance of the mansion. Ningguan is a quick person, so she hurried out of the courtyard to investigate. Not long after, she came back panting and said, "My lady is not good. You should go to the main courtyard and have a look. It seems that the master has been beaten." Fan Qinjiao felt a bang in his head and quickly picked up his skirt and walked out. In the main courtyard, Tao Yuxian was bandaging Hua Yaoding. There was nothing serious, just some superficial injuries, but seeing it like this with the naked eye still made people feel panicky, especially the blood flowing down his eyebrows. Which frightened several daughters-in-law so much that their faces turned pale. What the happened? That's right, how can a good person be beaten? Should we report it to the official? Faced with the chattering of his daughters-in-law, Hua Yaoding glanced at Fan Qinjiao at the door, then withdrew his gaze and said, "At the end of the year, there will always be some desperate robberies, but fortunately it was only a minor injury. Now our Hua family can't make too much noise, so you just pretend you don't know about this." Hua Yaoding's words were an order in the Hua family. Although the Hua family's daughters-in-law were unwilling to do so, they did not dare to say any more. Hua Yaoding then looked at Fan Qinjiao and said, "It's okay, you can go back to your yard. The main city will be a mess at the end of the year, so you should go out less often. Fan Kinjao nodded and followed his aunts out of the main courtyard. Tao Yuxian looked at Fan Kinjao's leaving figure and sighed heavily. That kid Xiao Kinjao has always been smart. Are you sure you can really hide it? Hua Yaoding also sighed and said nothing. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 746. Chapter 746 Bringing the matter to the palace. Tao Yuxian was right to worry, because Fan Kinjao didn't believe in robbery at all. After leaving the main courtyard, Fan Kinjao went to the concierge and saw Fan Zhao lying in the room. His body was also red, swollen, and bruised, especially his right arm, which was directly broken. As soon as Fan Zhao saw the young lady coming, he quickly stood up and said, "Miss." Fan Kinjao quickly pushed him down on the bed. "Is your injury related to my grandfather's?" Fan Zhao thought about Hua Yaoding's explanation and said vaguely, "It's not a big deal. Miss, there is no need to worry. The old lady has already seen the injury for me. It will be fine after a few months of recovery." Fan Kinjao looked at Fan Zhao coldly. "Editor, continue editing." Fan Zhao said bravely, "Miss, please feel free. It's really just a small matter. In the main city, under the emperor's feet, it is a capital crime to rob an official of 4th rank or above. If it is really a trivial matter, you should lie that you had a conflict with other people, not that you were robbed. And you have to say in advance that you take off the Huajia brand hanging on the carriage, or lose it. Otherwise, do you really think that there is anyone who is not afraid of death and wants to rob it even though he knows it is the Huajia general's carriage?" Fan Zhao. "This is called lying. It is really watertight." Fan Kinjao looked at Fan Zhao and said, "Tell me, what happened?" Fan Zhao was really helpless. The same lie worked well for other people, but it didn't work for the young lady. It wasn't that he had any intention to say it, but that he really couldn't stand it anymore. Gritting his teeth, Fan Zhao recounted what happened in front of the palace today. There were more than 40 people in the group who blocked the carriage in the alley. It must be the dog slave in the palace who had a grudge. After thinking of this way, I am too quick to talk, but maybe it will be fine if I hold back. Fan Kinjao really didn't expect that things would develop so fast. She thought it was early to enter the palace this afternoon, but she didn't expect that the palace already knew about it. What are the slaves in the palace? They are all fake and powerful things. A slave dares to have such courage to ridicule my grandfather and collude with others to do evil things to my grandfather. This shows what the emperor's attitude is towards the Hua family. Thinking about the humiliation Fan Zhao and his grandfather had suffered today, Fan Kinjao was filled with rage. "Do you know the eunuch's name?" "It seems to be called Sun de Fu." "I took a close look at the sign on his waist from a distance." Fan Kinjao nodded, stood up and walked out. Fan Zhao quickly stopped the person. "Miss, I said this matter will have a great impact, and I hope you will think twice. My life is worthless. Even if I die, I won't regret it." Fan Zhao is very content to be able to stay in the Hua family for a long time. Furthermore, the Hua family treated him and his brothers well. If it was really because of his talkativeness that he caused trouble to the Hua family, he would not be able to close his eyes even if he died. Fan Kinjao stopped, looked at Fan Zhao, and said after a long while, "Take good care of your injuries." Fan Zhao had a rough background, but since he followed her into the Hua family, he has been loyal and loyal. Fan Kinjao has never looked at her as a person, but more as a friend who shares the same hardships. Now that something happened to my grandfather, something happened to Fan Zhao too. If this matter really comes to an end, where will the Hua family's face be? How can she explain to Fan Zhao's brothers? Do you really want them to feel that they can't even get justice from the Hua family? Fan Qinjiao certainly wouldn't do anything that would lead to a loss. Fan Qinjiao would definitely not be able to swallow this tone. Just at this time, Nanny Su came over and said, "Miss, this is a message from the Queen." Fan Qinjiao took the post and directly ordered, "Prepare the car and enter the palace." The palace seemed unusually deserted in the afternoon. When Fan Qinjiao entered the palace, she went straight to Fenji Palace. However, after arriving at Fenji Palace, she did not go in. Instead, she knelt in the courtyard with her skirt gathered up. This move frightened the palace people in Fenji Palace. The crown princess is someone who is held in the palm of the queen's hand, so why is she forced to kneel down by herself when she is so good? Fan Qinjiao, however, remained motionless in the yard, kneeling for an hour in the cold weather. Seeing that this man's face turned pale, Lily had no choice but to ask the queen for help. "Queen, are you really going to let the crown princess kneel down like this?" Queen Zhen 11 sighed, "I don't feel sorry for you, but if you want to get things done, you can't feel sorry for me." She already knew what Fan Qinjiao was thinking since Feng Ming came to see her yesterday. Empress Zhen 11 also did not expect that Fan Qinjiao looked unambiguous in handling things despite his young age. Although this method was a bit risky, it was the only way now. After almost half an hour, Empress Zhen 11 looked at Lily and said, "If you tell me, I will tell you that I can't take charge of the affairs of the Hua family, but after all, she is the crown prince appointed by the emperor. I hereby order you to lead her to the imperial palace with my instructions." Lily nodded, fearing that the princess would really suffer from the cold, so she hurriedly walked out. Fan Qinjiao's legs were so cold that they couldn't control themselves. After listening to Lily's words, he slowly stood up and almost fell to the ground several times. Lily felt heartbroken when she saw it, but she couldn't really step forward to help her. Here, Fan Qinjiao had just left with Lily, and over there, Queen Zhen 11 called Yan Qian in front of her. "But you're gone." Reply to the queen, "I just left." Queen Zhen 11 nodded. Xiao Qinjiao really worked hard for the newly born child of the Hua family. Since Xiao Qinjiao believed in her mother-in-law, she would not let her future daughter-in-law down. She looked at Yan Qian and said, "The sooner the news is spread that the crown princess comes to visit me, the better." Yan Qian didn't dare to delay after receiving the order. After leaving Fenji Palace, he followed the queen's wishes and publicized the matter. The palace is the place where news spreads the fastest. In addition, there are so many pairs of eyes secretly staring at Fenji Palace. In almost a moment, the entire palace knows that the crown prince's request to see the queen is not successful, and the queen openly after rejecting the crown princess, she finally sent someone to send the crown princess to the imperial palace because she was concerned about the emperor's face. At this time, the 8th princess was accompanying concubine Jiangshu to talk, and was really shocked when she heard the news. It was so good, why did it suddenly become like this? Concubine Jiangshu's face was not very good looking. "I think the prince's marriage was decided by the emperor." The queen did not object or agree. Later, although she was tolerant of the prince, she seemed unwilling to disobey the emperor. Thinking about it, now that something is going on with the Hua family, the empress clearly wants to protect herself by doing this. The 8th princess was startled. "What do you mean? The queen mother and the crown princess have always been playing tricks on each other. Who can really be sure of the queen's thoughts, but we can't interfere with the affairs in the palace. It's better to watch from a distance." End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 747. Chapter 747, just looking at the excitement makes me burst into blood. In the past, people in the palace felt that the queen was easy to get along with and easy to handle. Even concubine Jiangshu, under this subtle influence, developed contempt for the queen. but it wasn't until she was with the queen that she discovered that it was the queen who had the most unfathomable thoughts. I look at him smiling all day long, but my heart is so deep that no one can guess. Concubine Jiangshu thought that it had not been long since she had been with the queen, but even now she still couldn't tell whether the queen was sincere or fake towards the crown princess. The eighth prince's concubine squeezed the handkerchief in her hand and said she was lying if she said she wasn't worried. Although she and the crown princess have a cooperative relationship, to be honest, she really likes the crown princess, and now she really doesn't want to see anything happen to the crown princess. On the other side, after concubine Panda learned that something happened to the crown princess, she immediately came to Yu Palace and told concubine Yu everything she heard about the goings-on in He Palace. Yunyu happened to be there too. She frowned when she heard this and said, "I didn't expect the Hua family to be so courageous. They even dared to keep their heirs. This clearly means they don't take the father seriously." Concubine Yu was not surprised. The great ancestor was kind and could not bear to kill, so we in Ziliang have always been forbidden to diagnose men and women. Now it is reasonable for the Hua family to suffer this loss. Think about it, didn't she suffer the same fate back then? If the imperial doctors in the palace knew the art of distinguishing between men and women, they would have known in advance that Fan Swinning was carrying a female baby in her belly, and she would not have been dragged into Fan Swinning for so long, and she was finally slapped in the face by Fan Kinjao. When she thought about the past, concubine Yu was out of breath. According to my concubine, the crown princess is finished this time. Everyone sees how guarded the emperor is against the Hua family. Now that the Hua family has a man, how can the emperor tolerate it? Now even the queen has given up, fearing that the Hua family will be in trouble this time. When concubine Pan thought about never seeing Fan Kinjao again, she grinned happily from ear to ear. Yunyu is not so optimistic. After all, she has fought against Fan Kinjao. This matter depends on the emperor's wishes. It is too early for us to draw a conclusion now. Concubine Panda didn't care and said, "The facts are already obvious. If the emperor can really give the Hua family a breath, how can the queen and the empress do anything to kill the donkey? She deserves to be the little of the princess. She is so arrogant at the beginning. Pooh. Before I did anything, I was sitting here and scolded." Concubine Yu looked at concubine Panda's self-satisfied look and frowned so hard that she could kill a mosquito. Although she also hoped that Fan Kinjao and the Hua family would disappear completely, the matter had not developed to the last step, and no one knew whether there would be a turn for the better. As a result, Pan Di Phi was so restless. Fortunately, this is in Yu Palace. If such a slip of the tongue were covered up in other places, wouldn't it be digging a hole for oneself? Yunyu couldn't keep away from concubine Panda's smug look and looked at her mother-in-law speechlessly. Concubine Yu. I don't know what kind of pain I had to have before marrying Pandafira. The Ziliang Palace is so big that even if there is no delay, it will take less than half an hour to get from Fenji Palace to the Imperial Palace. Therefore, by the time Fan Kinjao followed Lily into the Imperial Palace, the news had already reached everyone's ears. At this time, there were many courtiers standing outside the imperial study, all waiting to give advice. Fan Kinjao just walked over under the gaze of everyone. Some were surprised, some were puzzled, some were sarcastic, some were watching with cold eyes, all kinds of things, just like opening a dyeing workshop. Lily quickly raised her eyes and glanced around the people standing in the yard, and then quickly lowered her head. Counting the errands in this yard, there must be at least 20 or so, adding up to more than 40 eyes staring at one person. Such a depressing feeling was really unspeakably suffocating, even for her. They are all a bit unbearable. If it were any other woman, she would be so frightened that she would cry. The crown princess will wait here for a moment, and I will send you the queen's sign, Lily whispered. Excuse me, Aunt Lily. Fan Kinjao nodded and stopped where he was. As Lily left, the eyes that originally fell on Fan Kinjao became even more unscrupulous. Everyone knew something had happened to the Hua family, but what no one expected was that at this time, the crown princess did not want to cry about the injustice of fate in the palace, but instead openly entered the palace, which was even more embarrassing. In front of the emperor. Don't the crown princess know that the emperor is on guard against the Hua family? Don't the crown princess know that the emperor is very angry? I really didn't look at the almanac when I went out today. If we had known that we would encounter this, why would we have to stand here in such pain? It would be more relaxing to sit in the house and drink tea. Some people just don't know how to advance or retreat. Do they really think that they are lawless after being banned? If you are in trouble, just bear it on your own, why bother others? Rows of courtiers spoke sarcastically to each other. Don't blame them for being harsh. The middle of the court is a place where everyone worships those who are superior and those who are inferior. Moreover, the emperor is really in a bad mood. They are waiting to give advice. Will it be fine? The more these people watched, the more they felt that Fan Kinjao was an eyesore. Some people even walked directly in front of Fan Kinjao and said sarcastically, "I advise the crown princess to leave the palace as soon as possible. After all, she is a woman who has not left the boudoir. If she really I was sent out of the palace by the emperor, and I would have to live or die if I didn't think about it until then, but it was too late." Fan Kinjao looked at the courtier who was speaking. "You are?" "I am a bachelor's degree student at the Hanlin Academy." Zhang Jiahong puffed up his chest and looked proud. No wonder they say that women with long hair are short of knowledge, and it is indeed true. Fan Kinjao smiled lightly. "Oh." Zhang Jiahong snorted coldly, thinking that he was probably frightened by his identity. But Fan Kinjao's next words directly pushed Zhang Jiahong's face to the ground. "I'm not familiar with you." "Zhang Jiahong. How can this princess have such a vicious mouth at such a young age? I am just reminding the crown princess with good intentions. Why should the crown princess be so aggressive? It is really difficult to raise a villain and a woman," Zhang Jiahong said with a cold face and an air of education. Fan Kinjao was not angry after hearing this, and was still smiling. "Compared with the ministers present, I am indeed ashamed, but no matter what, I am the crown prince appointed by the emperor. Could it be that the ministers present do you think I'm not even worthy of admonishment? This is a bit extreme. Since the word crown princess is designated by the emperor, it means she is someone recognized by the emperor. Now if it is really said that Fan Kinjao is not qualified to remonstrate, wouldn't it be a slap in the emperor's face?" In an instant, the ministers in the row in front of the royal study all had faces as dark as the bottom of a pot. They were just watching the fun, but they could be covered in blood. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 748. Chapter 748 sent to the palace as a companion reading. Fan Kinjao turned to look at Zhang Jiahong aside. "If I remember correctly, I am a bachelor of the Hanlin Academy from the 4th grade. Instead of worrying about me when you have time, Mr. Zhang, I would rather have more confidence in myself. I will go to court, only the free ones will come out. Don't wait till the end. Mr. Zhang will no longer be qualified to enter the palace. In Ziliang, ministers starting from the 4th rank are eligible to enter the palace and attend court." Zhang Jiahong had always been proud of his status. After all, he grabbed a lot of people who were not qualified to go to court. But now Fan Kinjao went in the opposite direction and not only pressed his to the ground, but also rubbed him crazily. No matter how thick Zhang Jiahong's face was, his face was now purple from being rubbed. "Who do you think is the one behind the wheel? I'm just kindly reminding you I didn't expect Master Zhang to be so self-aware. If all the ministers in Ziliang have Master Zhang's self-awareness, Ziliang's future will get better and better." Zhang Jiahong. Almost not by Fan Kinjao's rake, pouring the rake on the ground. Other courtiers. It felt like they were being scolded again, but no evidence could be found. Just when Fan Kinjao silenced all the ministers, Lily had already handed over the queen's sign. If it were anyone else, they would not get into trouble with the emperor at this time, but Baitu gritted his teeth and turned around to report. The prince's side had already sent someone to inform him yesterday. At this time, he had no choice but to find a way to let the prince see the emperor. Your Majesty, the crown princess is outside asking for an audience. It was Emperor Yongchang who was looking at the brocade box in his hand in a daze after listening to these words. It took him a long time to come back to his senses and said, "No." Baitu had known that this would be the case, and after thinking about it, he added, "I heard that it was sent by the queen's people." Emperor Yongchang frowned. Does the queen not want to take care of it anymore? The Hua family has indeed given birth to an heir, and Emperor Yongchang is also grappling with this, but he never expected that the queen would move faster. The Hua family just had an heir yesterday, and today the queen is too lazy to even deal with it with Fan Qingjao. Cope with it? Although Emperor Yongchang felt that the queen's move was quite inappropriate. After all, he had not yet decided how to deal with the matter. But after thinking about it carefully, the queen agreed to the marriage in order to obey him. Later, she was quite dissatisfied with Fan Qingjao. Taking care of her is nothing more than wanting to follow his wishes. Bring people in, Emperor Yongchang said, hiding the brocade box in his hand like a treasure in the drawer. He didn't know what to do with the Hua family, so he couldn't do things too badly now. The queen had already let him go. He can't really just ignore it. Baitu breathed a sigh of relief and quickly turned around and walked out. Fan Qingjao was standing with a group of courtiers with dark faces, when he saw Baitu coming in a hurry. In fact, everyone saw it, but no one expected that Baitu would stand in front of Fan Qingjao in the end. Seeing Baitu respectfully inviting people inside, the courtiers present wanted to spit out their old words. Blood. Didn't it mean that the emperor is still on guard against the Hua family? Didn't he say that the emperor must get rid of the Hua family this time? What's going on now? Just at this time, Zhou Chun, the Minister of Rites, passed by and looked at Fan Qingjao, who was walking away, and then looked at the virtues of the courtiers holding back their blood. You don't have to guess what's going on. I'm afraid that the crown princess gave him a bad rebuke. Fan Qingjao ignored the confused expressions of the courtiers behind him and followed Baitu into the imperial study. In the imperial study room, the light was still dim and depressing. Fan Qingjao stepped forward respectfully, knelt on the ground and kowtowed in greeting, "Long live your emperor, long live your majesty." Emperor Yongchang did not expect that Fan Qingjao was so self-aware that he even changed his title. "I heard that you made such a fuss at the queen's place that the queen had no choice but to send you to me." Those who don't know what he said may think that Fan Qingjao is the one making trouble unreasonably. "I have an urgent matter and want to go to the palace to admonish the emperor. I know that I am of low status, so I beg the queen to recommend me. I never thought that the queen is unwell. It is my recklessness." Fan Qingjao lowered his head and spoke in a clear voice. Sincerely, it really seemed like he had done something wrong. Emperor Yongchang raised his eyebrows slightly. Unexpectedly, Fan Qingjao was still willing to help the queen out at this time. Originally, he just wanted to send it off after seeing someone. After all, Emperor Yongchang reacted with anger when he saw the Hua family. But now when he saw Fan Qingjao lying down and making a submissive gesture, he finally relaxed and said, "Well, why are you so anxious to see me?" Fan Qingjao lowered his head and said, "Yesterday, the Hua family had an heir. So, I want to congratulate the Hua family." Emperor Yongchang frowned, obviously unhappy. "Are you showing off to him?" Fan Qingjao felt chills in her heart. Because of the emperor's suspicion, it was a sin for the Hua family to even give birth to a new life. But this time she did not come to the palace to argue. "The reason why I am so anxious to give advice is I have something to ask the emperor." Emperor Yongchang was silent and did not speak, as if he was thinking about what Fan Qingjao was talking about. Fan Kinjao knelt on the ground with her head hanging down, feeling relieved in her heart, but she knew not to panic, let alone be confused. Emperor Yongchang looked at the low-profile Fan Kinjao in front of him, and gradually remembered the purpose of his original marriage proposal. During this period, Fan Kinjao did a good job. Under Fan Kinjao's supervision, the prince had indeed always behaved as he should. Fen has never done anything out of the ordinary. Furthermore, the imperial army still relies on Fan Kinjao to support itself. The new year is coming soon, and when the new year is over, it will be the time when the army is in urgent need of military pay. If the chess piece of Fan Kinjao is really abolished now, Emperor Yongchang will really be reluctant to part with it. Let's talk and listen. My maid heard that the third prince's maternal grandfather's family was also blessed with an heir some time ago. Emperor Yongchang was stunned for a moment, and after thinking about it carefully, he remembered that this was indeed the case, and concubine Yu specifically mentioned it to him at that time. What does this matter have to do with the heirs of the Hua family? The great ancestor was kind, and the emperor was courteous and virtuous, and loved talents and scholars. Therefore, only the children of courtiers of fourth rank or above in the court had the opportunity to enter the palace and study with the princes. Do you want the heirs of the Hua family to study in the palace? I do have a plan. In an instant, Emperor Yongchang's face turned cold. This Fan Kinjao is really brave. He knows that he cannot tolerate the Hua family's heirs, but now he wants to put the Hua family's heirs under his nose. What is he doing? It is impossible to challenge the majesty of an emperor like him. In an instant, Emperor Yongchang raised his arms. But at the moment when his arm was about to fall heavily on the desk, Fan Kinjao's voice slowly sounded again, "Every young master who comes to the palace to study needs a reading companion. I heard that the emperor has been overworked on state affairs recently. So my daughter is willing to share the emperor's worries and send the descendants of the Hua family to accompany the third prince's maternal family." Emperor Yongchang. The arms were stiff in mid-air, obviously unable to fall down. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 749. Chapter 749, It's Just Making Trouble. She, Fan Kinjao, can do it too. The third prince's maternal grandfather was the second-grade governor of the imperial city. It was precisely because the Yu family had been helping him over the years that he had allowed the Yu family to rise to the present level. Of course, Emperor Yongchang was not worried about the Yu family having any inappropriate thoughts. After all, his people have always been keeping an eye on the Yu family. In recent years, the Yu family has long been distracted from concubine Yu. Although everything seems to be calm on the surface, in fact, they are planning their own plans behind the scenes. Generally speaking, Emperor Yongchang felt relieved about the Yu family. But what does it mean that Fan Kinjao wants to send the heirs of the Hua family to the Yu family now? Do you know what it means to be a scholar? Emperor Yongchang stared at Fan Kinjao. Basically, the attendants will only be with one young master. Once the Hua family chooses the Yu family, they must not have any second thoughts, otherwise, let alone he can't tolerate it. The most taboo in the court is this kind of wallflower. How easy is it? Who dares to use the Lord's people with confidence? Even if the children grow up in the future, the children of the Hua family will always be suppressed by the Yu family. In other words, if the heir of the Hua family is weak, he will be involved in the Yu family for the rest of his life. To put it bluntly, this is basically throwing the heirs of the Hua family to the surveillance of the Yu family. My daughter doesn't really understand the meaning of serving as an attendant, but if this choice can make the emperor feel at ease, my daughter and even the entire Hua family will be willing to do so. Fan Kinjao entered the palace today just to plead with the emperor, and now he has done enough. Low profile. Emperor Yongchang narrowed his eyes slightly and said, "You are quite reasonable. The glory that I have today is a gift from the emperor. The comfort that the Hua family has now is also due to the kindness of the emperor. My grandfather often warned my daughter not to forget my roots. I am grateful to the emperor for everything he has done for the Hua family. Besides, the Hua family has no sympathy for the emperor, so the Hua family is willing to do anything to make the emperor smile." This statement was very straightforward, so straightforward that even Bai Tu standing at the door was amazed. There have always been many people who have tried to please the emperor. It can even be said that everyone has the intention to please the emperor, but this is the first time that the crown princess has said it directly and frankly, word for word. Such blatant flattery is disdainful to civil servants, but military officers do not understand it. But everyone doesn't know that the people who are best at suspicion often need simplicity and clarity. Looking at the thin figure kneeling in the imperial study, Bai Tu was really convinced. No wonder the crown princess is able to strategize. Looking at her ability to flatter others, it really makes people feel more comfortable. Emperor Yongchang didn't expect Fan Qingjao to speak so directly, and was stunned. Who doesn't like to hear nice words? Especially this word can still relieve sorrow and troubles. Since the Hua family has decided on this matter, I won't say anything more. Get up. Compared with the benefits brought by Fan Qingjao, Emperor Yongchang temporarily suppressed his thoughts of killing everyone. However, Fan Qingjao knelt on the ground and did not get up. "I would like to inform your majesty that I have one more thing to ask for." Emperor Yongchang's joy turned to anger, thinking that Fan Qingjao was trying to push his limits. "You have asked for a lot today." Fan Qingjao lowered his head and his shoulders trembled slightly. "Actually, today, my grandpa was thinking of personally proposing to the emperor that he should send the descendants of the Hua family to be his companions after he went to court, but he didn't want to meet an imperial minister on the way. My father-in-law, not only did he ridicule my grandfather for pretending to be his grandson, but he also secretly found thugs to block my grandfather's way back to the house and kill him." Emperor Yongchang was stunned when he heard this, and was obviously unaware. "Are you telling the truth?" Fan Qingjao lowered his eyes and choked several times. "Human life is at stake, and I dare not tell lies in front of the emperor. Now my grandfather is still lying in the mansion recovering from his injuries. My grandfather is devoted to serving the country and the emperor. Even if I didn't take it to heart when I was ridiculed by the villain, but I didn't expect that it would lead to murder. Human life is at stake. I beg the emperor to take a closer look." As soon as these words came out, even Feng Gu standing at the door swayed. It was indeed the old general of the Hua family who he rejected today, and he was the one who sent someone to the old general of the Hua family out of the palace. He originally wanted to win some face for the old general of the Hua family, but he almost lost his life if he didn't earn any face. "Are they all taken in?" "Feng Gu. The slave is here." Feng Gu hurried in and knelt down behind Fan Qingjao. "Do you know what the crown princess just said?" Emperor Yongchang knew that Hua Yaoding wanted to remonstrate, so he delayed it on purpose, just to see what the Hua family wanted to do, but what happened next he really didn't know the matter. Baituru said truthfully, "This servant was busy serving the emperor." After conveying the emperor's words to General Hua Lao, he asked Sun Defu to General Hua out of the palace gate. Emperor Yongchang frowned and remained silent. Fan Qingjao continued, "I didn't expect that the father-in-law was actually a person in front of the emperor. In this case, the father-in-law's talk about his daughter-in-law was all in his sleep. I guess the father-in-law also wanted to avenge the injustice for the father." Emperor Yongchang changed his title, and Fan Qingjao naturally had to follow suit. But this speech from a father-in-law made Emperor Yongchang extremely harsh. Since she calls him father, it means that he and she are a family. If we really let this matter go, wouldn't it be clear that he, the emperor, has his elbows turned outward? The most important thing is, as the most respected person in Ziliang, When did he need an to help him stand out? If this spreads out, he will lose his old face. Check. Bai 2, check carefully for me. If this is really the case, you will be severely punished. Yes, I obey the order. Fan Kinjao also breathed a sigh of relief when he heard that the emperor handed it over to Bai 2. Isn't it just making trouble? Do you really think she, Fan Kinjao, doesn't know how? How could a little dare to ridicule the great ancestor of his master in public? If there is no one behind this, Fan Kinjao certainly doesn't believe it. Fan Kinjao is still beyond the control of matters within the palace. It would be better if the emperor sends someone to investigate in person. Maybe an unexpected surprise can be found. After all, it is the most taboo thing for the emperor that the people in the harem can find out the news about the emperor. Fan Kinjao kowtowed to the emperor again, but when he stood up and looked up, he was stunned when he looked at the emperor's face. Calculating that the emperor will be nearly 50 this year, in my impression, although the emperor has the domineering appearance of an emperor, his face has already shown its vicissitudes under the baptism of time. But now, this face is not only smooth and bright, but also has slender eyes. The lines are no longer visible. Just based on this face, if I say that I have just passed my 40s, some people will believe me. Fan Kinjao knew very well that although the Linxia pills were mixed with her blood and had the effect of rejuvenating the face, counting on his fingers, the emperor should have finished all 3 pills long ago. Without the nourishment of her blood, the youthfulness shown on the emperor's face should gradually disappear. Just like the queen, she has long since returned to her original appearance. But the Emperor Yongchang seemed to notice Fan Kinjao's gaze and turned his head to look. Fan Kinjao immediately lowered his head, suppressed his fright and retreated respectfully. But after Fan Kinjao left, Emperor Yongchang called the secret guards around him and said, "Pass out what the crown princess just said, especially those who have followed the Hua family, be sure to let them know clearly." "I heard what the princess said." The secret guard took the order and quickly disappeared into the imperial study. Emperor Yongchang once again took out the brocade box hidden in the drawer, opened it carefully, and looked at the contents inside with an expression of obsession. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 750. Chapter 750. The Queen is poisoned. After leaving the imperial study room, Fan Kinjao could not calm down in his heart. The emperor's face was too young and weird. She was sure that it was definitely not the effect that the Linxia pill could bring. But if there was no problem with the Linxia pill, then what was the problem? Just as Fan Kinjao was thinking about it, he saw Ji Hongliao passing by in a hurry carrying a medicine box. "Why are you here?" "Master, where are you going?" Two people speaking in unison. Ji Hongliao reacted quickly. He pulled Fan Kinjao and said, "The queen has fainted." Fan Kinjao became serious after hearing this. "Do you know the reason?" Ji Hongliao shook his head. He really didn't know the specifics. Fan Kinjao stopped asking and hurriedly followed his master in the direction of Fenji Palace. Lily, who had been waiting at the entrance of Fenji Palace for a long time, saw Ji Hongliao coming and ran over quickly. When she saw the crown princess also leaving and returning, her heart felt very warm. "Just take a look." Ji Hongliao nodded, carrying the medicine box and entering the door. Fan Kinjao is just a daughter-in-law who has not yet married. Now that the empress has passed out and the master is here, if she goes in rashly, she will only cause people to incite discord between her and the master. Seeing the master follow the palace maid around the screen, she pulled Lily to talk. "Aunt Lily, what happened to the good-looking girl?" Lily sighed. After the crown princess left, concubine Lushu came to visit the empress. The two of them were enjoying the plum blossoms in the yard. The empress suddenly fainted. Fortunately, concubine Lushu reacted quickly and hugged the empress. Otherwise, The consequences will be disastrous. Fainted suddenly. No, it seems to be the slave's negligence. At that time, the slave went to bring tea to concubine Lu Shu. Unexpectedly, the slave left for a moment, and something happened to the queen. Lily was really afraid and regretful. It would have been better if she had not left. Fan Kinjao asked again, has your mother ever had such symptoms before? Lily shook her head and said, the queen's health has always been good. Although she occasionally suffers from insomnia, it is just an old illness. This has never happened in these years. Fan Kinjao frowned, his mind racing with thoughts. Insomnia is really annoying and may make people faint, but according to Lily, this disease has been following the Empress for many years, and the Empress has never been unconscious during the day, which shows that the Empress still knows how to self-regulate. If that's the case, how could he suddenly pass out due to insomnia? It's windy outside, the crown princess must pay attention to her health. Lily saw that it was too cold outside, so she invited Fan Kinjao inside. Anyway, the crown princess was able to come out of the imperial study safely, which is enough to show her support for the Hua family. In this case, there is no need for the crown princess to pretend to be disliked by the queen. Furthermore, it is reasonable for the crown princess to come after hearing the news that the empress fainted. Is the prince here? Yan Qian has just been to the East Palace in person and heard that the emperor sent the crown prince to meet with Zhangping from Nanjing and Feng Cheng. He is not in the palace at the moment. The emperor asked Bailey Feng Ming to meet the two Zhangpings. Fan Kinjao's heart skipped a beat. He estimated that the emperor had already decided to send people to the two cities to investigate. The two people were talking as they walked inside and saw concubine Lu Shu sitting in a chair in a daze. This is Fan Kinjao's first time to take a closer look at concubine Lu Shu. Her face is slightly younger than that of the empress. She is not as enchanting as concubine Yu. Instead, she has the tenderness and sweetness of a Jiangnan woman. Such a person, even if she is raped again. As time passes, there is a kind of beauty of Xiajiabiu. Concubine Lu Shu was probably frightened by what happened just now, and she still can't come back to her senses. When Fan Kinjao met the concubines in the harem, of course he would take the initiative and say, I have met Lu Shifei. In this palace, there are two concubines. One is the mother-in-law of the 8th prince, concubine Zhang Shu. The other one is the concubine of the 2nd prince in front of me, concubine Lu Shu. Normally, concubines in the harem would never have the same title, but it happened that this happened. It was concubine Lu Shu who was conferred the title of Shu first, and then concubine Zhang Shu climbed all the way up and successfully flew onto the branch. It was because the Ministry of Internal Affairs forgot that there was also the title of concubine Lu Shu. That was why when sending the title to the emperor, there was an extra Shu, and the emperor happened to choose another Shu. At this moment, two concubines came out of the palace. Your Majesty's golden words, even if they are wrong, cannot be changed. After all, no one dares to say that the emperor is wrong. Concubine Lu Shu came to her senses after hearing the sound, and gave an ugly smile. The crown princess is here. Fan Kinjao nodded, I heard that my mother fainted, so I rushed over to take a look. Concubine Lu Shu nodded and had no intention of speaking again. Fan Kinjao is not familiar with concubine Lu Shu, and the 2nd prince and concubine only showed kindness to her last time when they were in Pinglai Palace, so Fan Kinjao will naturally not take the initiative to get close to concubine Lu Shu at this time. The two of them were sitting on one side, one on the left, and the room was so quiet that it made people feel nervous. I don't know how long it took before Lily walked out of it and said, Princess, the queen is awake. Fan Kinjao stood up after hearing the sound and walked towards his bed. On the bed where she was sleeping, Queen Zhengzi was looking at the tent above her head in a daze, looking a little confused. Fan Kinjao thought that the queen had not recovered yet, so she walked to Ji Hongliao's side and asked, where is the queen injured? Ji Hongliao shook his head, there are no injuries, and the queen's pulse is normal. Fan Kinjao was stunned. Normal. One breath comes 4 times, neither floating nor sinking, neither big nor small, calm and gentle, with consistent rhythm. This is a sign of flat pulse, and it is indeed a normal pulse condition. But whether it was Fan Kinjao or Ji Hongliao, the expressions on their faces were not at all relaxed, but on the contrary, they were darkened. People's pulse changes with the body. A normal person's pulse is flat, but whether it is strenuous exercise or holding one's breath, the pulse will change in an instant. When Ji Hongliao just arrived at Fenji Palace and took the queen's pulse, the queen was obviously still unconscious. The pulse at this time was naturally a little weaker, so that we could determine the reason for the coma. Ji Hongliao was sure that even if the queen was unconscious just now, her pulse would be stable. But it is such an ordinary pulse condition that makes it even more weird. Lily also recognized Niduan, and her face turned pale. Is it difficult? Could it be that someone poisoned the queen? But the queen's food has always been in the hands of slaves, and others can't touch it at all. Fan Kinjao thought about Lily's appearance just now and knew that she was really worried about the queen. Lily is an old man who is with the empress. She was also the dowry who entered the palace with the empress back then. Lily has no doubt about the importance of the empress. But if it wasn't Lily, who could have this ability? End of this chapter.